The first thing Ven heard was the pillar breathing. It was not sound as people understood it, not air pushed through lungs, but a deep subsonic rhythm that lived in the bones, a pressure behind the eyes, a slow, patient thrum that rose from the heart stone far below and climbed the spine of the world. Still alive, he thought. Ven stood barefoot on a ring of white stone at the crown of the Aurelios pillar, where the air was thin enough to make thoughts feel fragile. Above him, the solar array spread like a frozen halo, mirrored petals, each the size of a plaza, angled to catch the distant sun. Gold light spilled between them and washed the imperial spires in perpetual dawn. Behind him, the court waited in practiced silence. The Empress sat upon the sinking throne. No one called it that, of course. Officially, it was the seat of continuance, carved from the first extraction of heartstone ever taken from Aurelios. It glowed faintly through its alabaster casing, like a pulse trapped in marble. The Empress reclined against it as if it were merely furniture and not the exposed nerve of the pillar itself. Ven closed his eyes and placed both palms against the tuning obelisk. The stone was warm, too warm. He exhaled slowly and began to sing. The note emerged low and steady, shaped in the back of his throat, felt more than heard. It slid into the obelisk and vanished, racing downward through veins of carved channel stone into the lattice beneath the solar petals. The array responded with a faint harmonic shimmer, mirrors adjusting, angles correcting by fractions too small for the eye. The court exhaled as one. Sympathy, that was what the root singers called it, binding stone to stone, will to matter, through shared frequency. It was not control, never control, only listening closely enough that the stone chose to answer. Then shifted the pitch, just slightly. The pillar flinched. His breath caught. There it was again, that wrongness, a hitch in the rhythm, like a heart skipping a beat. Then song faltered, the obelisk's glow dimmed, then surged uneven. "Continue," the Empress said. Her voice carried easily across the platform, silk over steel. She did not look at him, her gaze fixed instead on the horizon where the clouds lay beneath them, like a discarded world. Then swallowed. "Your radiance," he said carefully, letting his hands fall away from the stone. "The array is strained." A murmur rippled through the court. Gold-robed advisors leaned toward one another. The sun-sworn palace guards in burnished armor shifted their halberds in perfect unison. "Strained," the Empress repeated. She turned then, one brow arching. "It was tuned less than a cycle ago." "Yes," then said by me. "And yet you stand here again," the Empress stated. "Because the pillar asked," he said, before he could stop himself. Silence fell, sharp and dangerous. The Empress's eyes flicked to the High Cantor, who gave a thin, indulgent smile. "Root singers," he said gently, as one might excuse a child. "They anthropomorphize the Lithos, a cultural affectation." Then felt heat rise in his chest. "It isn't affectation. The Aurelios pulse is destabilizing. The siphons," the Empress cut in, "are functioning within acceptable parameters." She rose from the throne, the heartstone beneath her brightening in response, as if eager. "We are not here to debate theology. You were hired to tune my solar," she said. then hesitated. Far below, something groaned. Not sound, stress, a vast grinding complaint that echoed through the marrow of the pillar and into his teeth. "If the siphons continue at current draw," he said, quietly now, "the fracture will propagate, slowly at first, then all at once." The Empress studied him. For a moment, then thought he saw something flicker there. Fear, perhaps, or calculation. "Explain," she said. Then turned back to the obelisk and laid his hands against it again, this time not to sing, but to listen. He closed his eyes and let his awareness fall inward, sliding down the pillar's internal harmonics like a ladder of sound. What he felt made his stomach twist. The siphons were everywhere, not just the ceremonial ones displayed in the public galleries, those elegant spires that drew a measured glow from the heartstone to power lifts and lights and gardens, but thousands more, hidden behind walls, beneath floors, threaded through the noble districts like parasites. They drank greedily, without rhythm, without rest. The heartstone pulsed brighter, faster, like a heart forced into a sprint with no hope of stopping. "It's not one fracture," Ven said. "It's exhaustion." A laugh broke the tension. Lord Militant Kale, broad and radiant in his sunburst armor, stepped forward. "You expect us to believe the pillar is tired?" he questioned. "I expect you to believe it is alive," then shot back. The Sunsworn moved as one. Halberds crossed before him, their tips humming faintly with attrition fields, discordant frequencies that could shatter stone or bone. The Empress raised a hand, and they froze. "Enough," she said, her gaze returned to Ven, sharper now. "If what you say is true, what would you have us do?" Ven's mouth was dry. "Stop," he said. "Reduce the draw. Let the pillar rest." "And fall into the clouds," Kale scoffed. "Never." The Empress's lips curved into something like a smile. "You forget yourself, Root Singer. The height of Aurelios is the height of civilization. We do not descend." The pillar groaned again, louder this time. Ven felt it then, a hairline crack not in stone, but in sound, a fracture in the pulse itself. "Your radiance," he whispered. "It's already begun." The Empress's eyes hardened. "Seize him," she commanded. The Sunsworn did not hesitate. Ven reacted on instinct. He sang, not sympathy, but attrition, a sharp, cutting note that set the stone beneath the guard's feet ringing out of phase. The platform bucked violently. Two halberds shattered, spraying golden shards into the air. Ven ran. He vaulted the balustrade as shouts erupted behind him and sprinted across the upper terraces, past fountains fed by heartstone light and gardens that bloomed in defiance of altitude. Alarms began to ring, a piercing counterpoint to the pillar's wounded thrum. The root side entrance yawned before him, a maintenance aperture disguised as sculpture, leading down the sheer flank of Aurelios. No lifts, no rails, just handholds carved by generations of root singers who serviced the pillar where nobles never looked. Ven did not slow. He dove. For a breathless moment, there was nothing, no up, no down, just wind and the vast green glow of the miasma far below. Then his hands found stone. The root side was a cathedral of scars, deep grooves where cables ran, old siphon ports, sealed and sealed again. Ven descended in controlled falls, singing under his breath to coax the stone into offering holds where none should exist. Above him, the sun-sworn appeared at the edge, their armor blazing. "Stop!" Kale's voice boomed, amplified. "There is nowhere to go!" Ven laughed, breathless and wild. "You've never listened," he shouted back, and let go. He fell. Not straight down. The pillar caught him, grudgingly, ledges blooming beneath his feet in response to his song. As he descended, the world changed. The polished stone gave way to rough-hewn surfaces, gold to iron, perfume to soot. He passed the first hidden siphon an hour later. Then another, and another. They were ugly things, black metal clamps driven directly into the pillar's flesh, each with a faintly glowing conduit that vanished inward toward the imperial core. Thousands of them, leeching in silence. "No wonder you're screaming," Ven thought. He did not hear Nova approach. She was sitting on a jut of stone ahead of him, legs dangling over the abyss, mask pushed up into her tangled hair. Her goggles reflected the green fog below, making her eyes look like twin shards of miasma. "Took you long enough," she said. Ven skidded to a halt, heart hammering. "Who are you?" "Someone who listens," she replied. She tapped the stone beside her. "And someone who knows you don't have much time." As if summoned by her words, the air shifted. A low, mechanical thunder rolled up from below. Nova's smile was sharp. "Iron Crag," she said. They heard the screaming too. From the fog rose shapes of iron and smoke. Airships bristling with drills and cannons, climbing the pillar like beetles toward a feast. Ven felt the Aurelios pulse stutter again. And this time, it did not recover. The Iron Crag fleet did not glide like Imperial craft. It climbed. Great iron limbs unfolded from their hulls and bit into the Aurelios pillar with grinding precision. Pistons hissed, drills screamed. Each impact sent a shudder through the stone that Ven felt in his jaw. Nova swore softly, "They're early." Ven stared as the lead vessel latched on, a brutal wedge of steel bristling with antennae and pressure vents. Along its flank, enormous letters were stamped directly into the metal. "Pressure is truth." "Early for what?" Ven asked. "For subtlety," Nova said. She pulled her mask back down and rose to her feet. "Come on. If they see us, they'll assume you're already theirs." "That's comforting," Ven said. She grinned beneath the mask. "Trust me, it's worse if they think you're mine." They moved laterally along the root side, hugging shadows carved by centuries of maintenance and neglect. As they went, the sounds of the pillar grew louder, not volume, but complexity. Overlapping rhythms, discordant echoes. "They're talking," Nova said, as if answering his thoughts. Ven glanced at her. "You can hear it too?" he questioned. "I can hear something," she said. "You hear meaning, I hear panic." Below them, the miasma churned. Its green glow was brighter now, as if agitated by the vibrations traveling down the pillar's spine. A searchlight snapped on above them, slicing through the fog. "Move," Nova hissed. They scrambled down a service shaft just as a voice boomed from the Iron Crag vessel. "Ven of the Root Singers!" it called, amplified and precise. By order of the Iron Crag Compact, you are requested, not required, to surrender yourself for the preservation of structural truth. Nova snorted, requested. How polite. The shaft opened into a cavernous recess carved deep into the pillar's side. An old industrial node long since abandoned by the Empire. Cables hung like dead vines. At its center stood a machine Ven had never seen before. It hummed. Not with stone, but with steel. "What is that?" he asked. Nova's voice was reverent. "A scanner. Iron Crag tech. It listens the way machines listen, through pressure, vibration, fracture probability." Ven felt uneasy. "You use it." "I stole it," she said cheerfully. "Big difference." Footsteps echoed above them, heavy, deliberate. A man descended the shaft with the confidence of someone who had never doubted gravity. He wore no mask, no armor, only a long coat reinforced with articulated plates and threaded with pressure gauges that ticked softly as he moved. His hair was iron gray, his eyes sharp and calculating. "Ven," he said, as if greeting an old colleague, "I am Chancellor Theron." Nova stiffened. "You're shorter than I expected." Theron smiled faintly. "And you are louder than you realize." Iron Crag soldiers fanned out behind him, weapons lowered but ready, cannons tuned not to shatter, but to peel stone away in controlled layers. Theron's gaze never left Ven. "You can hear it," he said. "The Pillar's failure modes, the Empire's lies." Ven said nothing. Theron nodded, satisfied. "Good. Then we can be efficient." They did not chain him. That was the first surprise. Theron led Ven aboard the Iron Crag flagship, a vertical monstrosity clamped to the pillar's flank. Inside, the air smelled of oil and hot metal. Everything vibrated faintly, a constant reminder of stored force. "You don't believe in reverence," Ven said, watching a crew adjust pressure valves along a corridor wall. "We believe in inevitability," Theron replied. "Stone fails, systems fail, empires fail. Pressure reveals when." "And you plan to hasten it," Ven accused. Theron stopped before a vast chamber whose walls were lined with resonance plates and sensor arrays. At its center stood a skeletal map of the Aurelios pillar, rendered in shimmering lines of light. Fractures pulsed red. Stress zones bloomed like bruises. "We plan to survive it," Theron said, "and to carry truth forward." Theron gestured, "Sing." Ven's stomach dropped. "No," he said. Theron's expression did not change. "You misunderstand. This is not coercion. It is collaboration. You sing, we listen, and in exchange." Nova cut in. "You don't let the Empire murder the lower districts." Theron inclined his head among other considerations. Ven looked at the map again. The fractures were worse than he'd feared. Hairline cracks spiderwebbed upward toward the Imperial core. "If I do this," Ven said slowly, "you'll use what I give you to tear the pillar apart." Theron met his gaze. "If you don't, it will blindly tear itself apart." Ven closed his eyes. "Fine," Ven said, "but I set the parameters." Theron's smile was small and sharp, as all useful instruments do. The scanner hated him. That was the only way Ven could describe it. As he sang, carefully, tentatively, the machine responded with discordant echoes, translating his frequencies into pressure graphs and fracture probabilities. It stripped meaning from his song and replaced it with numbers. "Lower," Theron murmured. "There, that harmonic. Do you feel it?" Ven did. A hollow, aching weakness, deep within the pillar's midsection, where generations of workers lived and stacked warrens carved directly into stone. "The commons," Ven said. "You're draining them." Theron nodded. "I know." Ven exclaimed, "You know and you still..." Theron cut in, stating flatly, "Because the Empire does not care if they live. They care only that the crown remains above the clouds." Ven's voice shook as he continued. He mapped stress lines, identified load-bearing scars, exposed the truth of Aurelios to machines that did not flinch. All the while, Nova worked in the shadows. She rerouted cables, adjusted frequencies, piggybacked Ven's song onto Iron Crag transmitters, and sent it downward, into the depths of the pillar, as a warning. Down in the lower districts, people paused in their work as the stone around them began to hum, not painfully, urgently, a rhythm that spoke of strain and danger and lies. The pillar was dying, and the Empress was feeding on its corpse. The Zenith Summit was called at dawn. Imperial proclamation rang through every level of Aurelios, a command wrapped in velvet words. Representatives of the Iron Crag were invited in the spirit of unity. Root singers were summoned to bear witness. Then attended in chains. Ceremonial ones, light gleaming, meant more to shame than restrain. Theron walked beside him, hands clasped behind his back, as calm as a man entering a lecture hall. The summit chamber was a bowl of glass and gold suspended over nothing. Beneath its transparent floor, the clouds drifted like a false sea. The Empress stood at its center, radiant and serene. "My people," she said, voice carrying effortlessly, "we stand at a crossroads. Fear whispers that our world is failing. I say, look around you." She gestured. The solar array flared brighter. The glass floor glowed with reflected sunlight. "We still stand above the ground," she continued, "above chaos, above decay." Ven felt the pillar tremble. Theron stepped forward. "With respect, Your Radiance," he said, "your height is borrowed time." A ripple of shock passed through the chamber. The Empress smiled, Chancellor Theron, blunt as always. "Situations demand honesty," Theron replied. Ven moved before fear could stop him. He sang. The sound carried through the chamber, through the glass, through the stone itself. It was raw, unadorned, no harmony, no embellishment, just the pulse as it truly was, strained, fractured, screaming. The glass floor shattered, then panic erupted. Ven raised his voice, pushing through the chaos. Images bloomed in the air, projected through sympathetic resonance. Hidden siphons drained Heartstone, the skeletal map of Aurelios, fractures blazing. "The Empire is killing the pillar," Ven shouted, "to stay above you." The Empress's composure cracked. "Seize him," she demanded. But it was too late. Below, the commons roared. Soot workers, lift tenders, root singers, all pouring upward as the warning song reached its crescendo. They came not with swords, but with tools, hammers, drills, cutting torches. A new faction, the Lithoclasts, emerged as the sound of shattering stone cut through the air. The summit chamber lurched violently as the sinking throne slid. Theron watched it all with grim satisfaction. "Behold," he murmured, "the cost of denial." The Aurelios pillar began to fall. The horizon tipped, clouds pouring sideways as the Aurelios pillar groaned under a strain it had carried for centuries. Stone does not cry like flesh. It resonates, layer upon layer of accumulated stress, finally given voice. The sound traveled through every nerve of the pillar, through bone and blood and thought. People collapsed, clutching their heads. Windows burst outward in crystalline storms. And still the siphons drank. "Launch," Theron said calmly. Far below the summit's ruins, the Iron Crag flagship disengaged. Clamps released with thunderous booms. Pistons recoiled. Engines, massive layered rings of pressure-driven machinery, spun to life, grinding air and stone alike. The dreadnought pillar began to rise. It was a blasphemy of engineering, an artificial lithos built not from living stone but from compressed strata scavenged from a dozen dead pillars. Its surface bristled with siphons and pressure vents, its core a caged furnace of stolen heartstone. As it ascended, it dragged with it massive chunks of Aurelios. Buildings, bridges, entire districts ripped free by mechanical claws. "Survivors increase load stability," Theron said over the roar, as if reading from a report. "We will not abandon usable mass." Then staggered to his feet. Dust and blood streaked his vision. Around him, Lithoclasts fought sun-sworn amid collapsing architecture. The Empress was gone, swallowed by chaos or stone. It no longer mattered. Nova grabbed his arm. "That thing's going to take us with it." Then stared at the dreadnought pillar, rising like a false god through the clouds. "No," Ven said, "it's going to take the lie with it." Boarding the dreadnought pillar felt like trying to climb a moving mountain that actively resented you. Iron Crag soldiers poured from access hatches, firing pressure cannons that peeled stone away in controlled avalanches. Then sang attrition in sharp bursts, destabilizing armor joints, turning metal against itself. Nova moved like a shadow, explosives blooming where she touched. They reached the core shaft as the Aurelios pillar finally gave way. The top third of the Empire broke free, tilting into the clouds as gravity reclaimed its due. The sinking throne vanished into the white below, its stolen glow snuffed out. Inside the dreadnought, the noise was unbearable. Pressure alarms screamed, heartstone conduits flared, their light sickly and overbright. Theron waited for them at the core. The chamber was cylindrical, its walls layered with rotating rings of machinery. At its center floated the Heartstone engine, a massive, faceted crystal suspended in a web of force fields. It pulsed erratically, its rhythm forced into obedience by mechanical clamps. Theron spread his hands. "Behold," he said, "continuance." Ven felt tears burn his eyes. "It's in agony." "All power is," Theron replied, "until shaped." "You can't fix this," Ven said. "You're just building a taller coffin." Theron's gaze sharpened. "And you propose what? A return to the ground? To poisoned fog and forgotten myths?" "Yes," Ven said simply. Theron laughed. "You would trade certainty for faith." Ven replied, "I would trade lies for truth." Theron's hand moved. Pressure cannons whined to life. Nova lunged, but Ven was already singing. The void note was not a sound. It was the absence of resonance, a frequency so perfectly opposed to the pulse that it canceled vibration itself. Ven had never dared to shape it fully. Root singers spoke of it in warnings and half-forgotten songs. The note unraveled machines. The force fields flickered, pressure rings seized and tore themselves apart. The artificial clamps shattered, their harmonics collapsing into meaningless noise. The Heartstone engine went still. Theron screamed, not in fear, but fury, as the dreadnought pillar began to die. "You would doom us all," Theron roared. Ven held the void note, voice bleeding, throat tearing as he widened it, casting it outward through the siphon networks into the remains of Aurelios itself. The Imperial siphons failed simultaneously. Across the collapsing world, stolen energy flooded back into wounded stone. The fall became something else. Ven stood at the heart of the Great Descent, shaping the chaos as best he could, guiding broken pillars and shattered districts as they fell through the clouds. He sang to slow rotation, to spread impact, to let fragments settle rather than shatter. Around him, people clung to debris, to each other, to hope. The green glow of the miasma rose to meet them, swirling and luminous. Nova coughed as they passed through it. "This is the part where we die, right?" Ven listened. The shattered Heartstone fragments glowed softly as they fell, their light filtering the fog, breaking down its toxicity. Ven laughed, ragged and disbelieving. "No," he said, "this is the part where we breathe." They hit ground, real ground, unseen for millennia, in a chaos of dust and stone and light. The miasma thinned. Green fog dissipated into pale mist, filtered through veins of broken Heartstone now scattered across the land like fallen stars. The air burned the lungs at first, then softened. People emerged from the wreckage, coughing, laughing, crying. Ven collapsed to his knees, hands pressed to soil that trembled faintly with deep, ancient life. The pulse here was different, slower, older, vast beyond comprehension. Nova stood beside him, mask discarded, eyes wide. "So," she said, "what do we build now?" Ven looked around at the broken remains of pillars, at people already gathering, helping, arguing, living. "No thrones," he said, "no heights worth killing for." He placed his palm on the ground and sang, not to command, but to listen. The stone answered. And for the first time in human memory, it did not hurt. The fog was no longer green. It lingered at dawn in pale ribbons, clinging to the low valleys where broken stone still slept, but it no longer burned the lungs or blurred the mind. Children ran through it, laughing, vanishing and reappearing like ghosts, their voices clear and unafraid. Ven watched from the ridge. The land below him was an improbable mosaic, shattered pillar segments, half buried in soil, Heartstone veins exposed to the air like cooling embers, new growth threading its way through cracks that had once been vertical walls. What had fallen had not been erased, it had been repurposed. Nothing here was tall anymore. That more than anything still unsettled him. He rested his staff against a stone that had once been part of Aurelius's upper ring, polished marble, now dulled by wind and rain. He placed his palm against it and listened. The pulse was faint here, like an old memory, but it was peaceful. "You keep checking," Nova said behind him, like it's going to change its mind. Ven smiled without turning. "Habit," he replied. She joined him on the ridge, her boots crunching over gravel and crystal dust. Her hair was shorter now, cropped for practicality, streaked with white where Hearthstone light had burned it during the descent. Below them, the settlement stirred. Tents had given way to low stone structures, built outward rather than upward. Communal hearths glowed at the center of each cluster, fueled by carefully rationed Hearthstone shards embedded in clay, never pierced, never drained. The root singers insisted on that. They were no longer nomads. That still felt strange. "The council is asking for you again," Nova said. Ven winced. "Asking or summoning?" he questioned. She smirked. "They're trying very hard not to sound like an empire." He sighed and picked up his staff. "I suppose that is progress." They descended together toward the settlement's heart, where a ring of standing stones marked the first place humans had ever deliberately stopped falling. Each stone bore scars, names carved, dates scratched, songs etched into the surface in root singer notation. At the center burned a low flame, its light refracted through a Hearthstone fragment suspended above it. The council waited in a circle. They were an odd gathering. Former soot workers, Iron Crag engineers stripped of insignia, root singers in patched cloaks, even a handful of ex-Sunsworn, whose armor now lay melted down into plow blades and tools. "We've reached the western debris field," said Mara, once a lift tender, now something like a mayor. "The stone there is, restless." Ven nodded. "It will be." That section fell hard. "We thought you should listen," Mara stated. "I will, but I won't decide alone," Ven said. A murmur passed through the circle, approval mixed with unease. Old instincts died slowly. Nova leaned in. "You realize you've become a tradition, right?" Ven groaned softly. "I was trying to end those." Nova replied, "You ended the bad ones. Now people are just making new mistakes." Later, as the sun dipped low, no longer distant and aloof, but warm and immediate, Ven returned to the ridge alone. He sang a simple note, a grounding tone the root singers were teaching to children now. A note that asked rather than commanded. The land answered in small ways, a settling of gravel, a sigh of cooling stone, the subtle alignment of fractured pieces finding equilibrium. As the light faded, Ven felt something shift within himself, a silence where the void note had once lived. He had feared it would leave a wound. Instead, it left space. He pressed his hand to the earth and listened one last time. Far away, deep beneath layers of soil and time, the ancient lithic giants slept, not dead, not whole, but healing in their own slow way. Ven smiled. "Rest," he whispered. Time moved forward. "Mama says the world used to be tall. I try to imagine it, but it's hard. Tall feels like something you fall from, And Mama says falling was bad back then. She says people lived so high they forgot what down felt like. She laughs when she tells it, but her hands always go still. Our house is low, all the houses are. Ours is made from 3 old stones that don't quite match, with moss growing where the cracks meet. When the wind blows, the stones hum a little, not scary, just like they're remembering something. I like that sound. It helps me sleep. Every morning, I go with Baba to the listening field. That's what we call it, though the grown-ups say it's for monitoring stability, which is a lot of words for standing still and paying attention. Baba presses his ear to the ground. I copy him, even though he says my ears are too small to hear properly yet. Sometimes I think I hear things anyway. The ground feels warm today, not hot, just friendly. Still good, Baba says, standing the stones resting. I nod like I understand. On the way back, we pass one of the bright pieces. Heartstone, Mama calls it. This one is small, no bigger than my head, and it sits in a clay bowl in the middle of the path. Light shines through it, soft and greenish gold, and the plants around it grow taller than anywhere else. I wave to it. Mama says that's silly, but she does it too when she thinks I'm not looking. After lunch, Teacher Nova comes. She's not really a teacher, but she knows how to fix things and how to tell stories, which is the same thing, I think. She carries tools in her bag and always smells like dust and oil and sunlight. All right, she says, clapping her hands. Who wants to hear about the fall? Everyone raises their hand. She sighs, of course you do. We sit in a circle, and she draws in the dirt with a stick. She makes tall lines, really tall, and then scribbles fog underneath them. Long ago, she says, people thought being high made them safe. From what? I ask. She pauses from each other. I don't really understand that, so I watch her draw a big crack through one of the tall lines. There was a singer, she continues, not a performer, a listener. He heard the stone hurting. I lean forward like how we listen now. Like that, she says softly, but louder, braver. She draws the tall lines falling sideways, breaking into pieces. Did everyone die? Someone asks. No, Teacher Nova says they learned how to land. When the lesson's over, I run to the ridge where you can see all the way to the old fog valleys. The mist is thin there, drifting like sleepy clouds that forgot how to float. There's a man standing near the edge. He's old, not teacher old, but stone old. His hair is white and his clothes are plain, and he's leaning on a staff that looks like it grew that way instead of being made. He's humming. Not a song, just a sound. I sit down a little away from him because Mama says you shouldn't bother people when they're listening. But after a while, he opens his eyes and looks at me. Hello, he says. Hello, I reply. Are you talking to the ground? I questioned. He smiles. I'm asking how it's feeling. I think about that. Does it answer? He pauses, then says, sometimes, mostly it just appreciates being asked. Did you fall? I ask suddenly. He looks surprised, then thoughtful. Eventually he replies, "Yes, I did." "Was it scary?" I asked. "Yes," he replied. "Was it worth it?" I questioned. He looks out over the land, over the low houses, the glowing stones, the people walking without looking down all the time. "Yes," he says again. This time he sounds sure. The ground hums softly beneath us. When I look back, he's still there, listening. I think when I'm big, I will listen too. Because Mama says the world doesn't need to be tall anymore. It just needs to be heard.